UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your hosts, Dr. Dean Bertram and Jenn Durrell.
Well, hey, baby.
Hey, baby.
How was your day?
Long. How was your day?
My day was crazy. I had my 6-year-old's birthday party today.
Yeah.
And I also was out in the cold, so I have like Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters type sunburn, but it was just from the freezing cold loading my truck in the Walmart car park.
Yeah.
But it was hectic. There were 6-year-olds running around at the party. And I bumped into, this is the weirdest thing. It's not even talking weird topic, but I can't help but say it. As everybody who listens knows, who regularly listens knows, I kind of live in the middle of nowhere, and I kind of have, a degree of self-sufficiency and chickens and a well and, a garden and everything else. I was at this family restaurant, which is at a town, I don't know, maybe 40 minutes from where I am because I'm in the middle of nowhere. This guy comes over and starts talking to me just because he heard my Australian accent. Really nice guy. And it turns out he's a guy from this YouTube channel I used to be a fan of. I don't have time to watch YouTube anymore, called Big Family Homestead. And I used to watch it all the time because I wanted to homestead. And here's this guy, he lives like an hour away in another direction from this town. He's in the middle of nowhere. I'm 40 minutes in the middle of nowhere. And we were both at this like family restaurant at lunchtime. Weirdest thing. But and I mean, it's a big channel. And I was like, God, get out. How nice this guy came out. And so I was obviously said, I'm a fan. It was kind of cool. A very strange moment. Yeah, just have famous YouTuber just come over and say hello to you. It was like, what on earth? But speaking of fanboying, I didn't fanboy then. I was just happy to see somebody that I used to watch regularly. But I'm in a little bit of a fanboy mode tonight because the guest we have on, I've been a big fan of his work, and his work was quite influential. I mean, when I did my PhD, and we'll get to that a little bit in the show, I think, but he first became interested in facts that don't fit from a very early age. And so he co-founded a magazine called The Excluded Middle in 1991. It was a fantastic magazine. It was a journal of UFOs, conspiracy research, psychedelia, and new science. It ceased publication in 1999, but Wake Up Down There was anthologized, many of the articles and features in 2000. It's fantastic. People should check it out because there's nothing quite like The Excluded Middle anymore, and that's probably the closest you're going to get to it. And his second book, though, released in 2005, was Project Beta. And anybody who listens to this show knows that I talk about this book all the time. Project Beta, the story of Paul Bennewitz's national security and the creation of a modern UFO myth. If I recommend UFO books to anybody, and I only said this recently on the show, there's this book and probably, some books by Keel, Vallée, maybe a Hynek book. Probably in the half dozen most important UFO books ever written is that book. And it documents the campaign of disinformation perpetrated against Bennewitz and all other kind of machinations. It's a fascinating book. We won't go down that path too much tonight, but people should read that book. Anyone interested in UFOs, if you haven't read Project Beta, you really need to. And then Weird California, A Strange and Eerie History of Places in the Golden State was released in 2006. And tonight's guest contributed about 75% of the material and photos in this book. And from December 2007 to November of 2011, he blogged for the UFO and paranormal site UFO Mystic. And his last book, which is absolutely also fantastic, It Defies Language, it has entries from that blog along with older materials plus brand new articles written for it. It's actually an awesome companion piece to Project Beta. Like if you read Project Beta, you probably want to see, kind of what happens next. Read It Defies Language. It is awesome. And then in 2019, along with co-writer Adam Go-Rightly, who's one of the other people I think in the field who is doing really interesting work, he co-wrote A is for Adamski, The Golden Age of the Contactees. And as anybody who also listens to the show, we had Glenn Steckling on once, who is the person who kind of continues the Adamski work. I'm fascinated with contactee stuff. I've always hated just dismissing it like people have tended to. Not that I necessarily think there's a reality to it, but I don't think it should be dismissed any more than, ufology has dismissed alien abduction accounts, which of course they haven't. And he's currently running a project called the Ufology Tarot, which, as I was telling you, Jen, I contributed to the Kickstarter campaign, so you and I could both get a deck of that. It honors and examines the history of UFO research and events in the tarot card format. For 2 years, he hosted The Hungry Ghost, a radio show of interviews and music, airing on pirate FM station KBLT in Los Angeles. His current show, Radio Misterioso, is available at radiomisterioso.com. So I am beyond excited to introduce tonight's guest, Greg Bishop. Greetings, Greg.
That was kind of a big, long, embarrassing and all-encompassing introduction. Thank you.
I'll try not to fanboy out too much. I mean, I don't often fanboy out in my life, but yeah, you and Dodie I fanboyed out for, but I don't know how much. I fanboy
out on everybody I interview just about. It's just really? It's like, I can't believe you're talking to me, even if it's somebody I know already.
You did some fantastic interviews on your show. You had Jim Moseley on a couple times back in the day.
Yeah. He was actually a friend, became a friend. He used to call me late at night and ramble to me while he was drinking whiskey. It was great.
I got drunk with him once in Clearwater, Florida, and that was one of my most memorable moments of my research back in my PhD days.
He's from that generation where alcohol is basically, you commiserate over it, you talk over it, you bond over it. And I did that with Jim quite a few times. The first time, strangely, was in a hotel room in Roswell in 1997.
Get out.
Now,
that would have been at the anniversary. Was that the 50th anniversary?
Before that. But yeah, it was. He had friends that were like this old couple that were driving around the country in a motorhome. And they had two giant, like 4 foot long, 3 foot deep ice chests full of booze and mixers. And they just said, make yourself a drink.
I thought you were going to say there were alien bodies in there as well.
Yeah. So anyway, the time I met him, I actually took him a really nice bottle of whiskey when I interviewed him for Excluded Middle. And then I got him to, after a while, I got him to wear Groucho glasses with a little mustache and all that.
It's in here. There's a photo of him.
Yeah.
I think in the Groucho.
Yeah, I took that picture in his hotel room in San Diego when I met him for the first time. I just said, "Hey, Jim, I'm going to be out there." That's right. Can I use swear words on this show?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, okay. It's not a horrible swear word. But he read me, that was the first time anybody ever heard of the Gray Barker poem, UFO is a bucket of shit. Read it to me, and I printed it in the magazine, and I see it all over the internet now. It's like, I know where it came from. It was in the Excluded Middle in like 95 or 4 or whatever.
Fantastic. I love that mag. I only had to be honest, I only had one copy of it. It was hard to find in Australia, so I eagerly bought Wake Up Down There when it was released. But that's something that I think is missing now. The Excluded Middle was fantastic. There were other mags like that. There was Steam Shovel Press. There was Paranoia. There was it Flatlands or something? There was a number of things.
Crash Collusion, Elf-Infested Spaces. I mean, these are all people I knew and actually friends of mine. In fact, Ken Thomas, who published Steam Shovel Press, was best man at my wedding.
Get out, really?
And it's fantastic. All the conspiracy type people I knew from then, people that were into the octopus stuff and JFK and the RFK and all the assassinations and all that. Every single one of them thinks that everyone has gone nuts. You would think they like, oh, right, everybody's in this conspiracy culture now. They're kind of horrified.
Really? That's hilarious.
What have they done with our work, with our baby? Now suddenly everybody believes everything, and they used to be the nuts. These guided full conspiracy people think QAnon is insane, and and none of them like Trump, and it's just kind of like, for different reasons, not because they're liberals or whatever. It's because they just think that it's just gone way, way, way off the deep end, like 100 times further than any of them would ever have taken it. And it's kind of weird. I tell people that's like old style conspiracy people think it's that everything's gone insane. And
I remember when I first read that Gemstone Files book about the Danny Casolaro stuff, and I was like, I don't know, my early 20s, and I was like, my goodness, it was so a lot of that stuff by people who were writing in those days just seemed earth shattering when you found that it was like,
yeah, me too. I felt the same way, and I kind of wanted to be part of it, and my friends and I. So, two of my friends Peter and Stencil and Robert Larson, we just said we want to do this too. So we just decided to do a magazine, and then we found out other people were doing zines. And we didn't do it because there was a zine movement. We just did it because we thought we don't like any of the magazines out right now. We want to talk to people that we want to talk to, and we want to talk about what we want to talk about. So there were magazines dealing with these things, but they were more mainstream or whatever, and none of them had our point of view in it. So we just said, screw that, let's just present our point of view. And it was it was basically college for 10 years for me.
That excluded middle position, just explain to people who mightn't know what the kind of meaning of exclude. It's better that you explain it than I do, what that meant, the excluded.
There is an actual philosophical term called the excluded middle. I think it's from Plato, saying that things are either true or false and there's no in between, as long as if you follow them to their end and research them enough. We didn't know that when we started the magazine. The excluded middle meant the area in between all these other questions where people go completely skeptical or completely believer or whatever it is. And we wanted to mine that area in between, that excluded middle, the part that nobody heard about. We thought it was excluded, and it generally was. And it still kind of is, as people get more and more polarized, there's no more excluded middle to, I think that excluded middle is kind of the mortar that holds together the building of all these different, viewpoints, that if you can find a middle ground between them, you can explore that. And especially with paranormal stuff and UFO stuff, if you get too polarized, at the beginning of I will give you an example. At the beginning of the UFO Tarot video that I did for the project for Kickstarter, the first line is the UFO is a Rorschach blot. And I really do believe that. You can attach any opinion you want to it and find, plenty of things to support it and also plenty of things to refute it. But people tend to ignore that in this mad rush. So anyway, and the term actually came from Peter. He had a radio show called The Little City in Space that was actually syndicated on NPR, I believe. And they would write, it was basically kind of firesign theater in space. It was amazing. You can find it on archive.org. But there was a commercial, they do fake commercials, and one of the commercials was basically for robots. And it was saying, are you an android? Are you a robot? Do you want to be a real human? We are offering programming where you can, you don't have to be a robot. And the very last line in the ad was discover the secrets of the excluded middle. And I said, Peter, can we use that for the magazine name? And he said, yeah. So that actually Peter Stencil. Yeah.
I feel it's needed more now than ever. I don't see people operating in that kind of middle space anymore. It seems to be, I'm not even sure if there's a really great skeptical movement, by the way, but there certainly seems to be, everything I see in popular ufology today seems to lean far more to that general ETH or extraterrestrial hypothesis type position. I'm not seeing either your type of work or the type of stuff, that John Keel was doing or that Patrick Harper might have done. And I haven't read it. I ordered it ages ago. It was on back order because I wanted the hardcover. Jacques Vallée's new book, the Trinity book, which, I've read everything Vallée's ever written. I'm such a fan of Vallée's. It's incredible. Yeah, me too. But my impression is that his last book, I heard an interview on Coast, and I think I read a few other things. It seems almost that Vallée has gone in the direction that he warned about in Revelations, that going towards that physical interpretation. Because when he was on Coast, he was talking about bodies being discovered and, a non-human craft being recovered. And he was very dismissive, as I think he should have been in Revelations, about UFO crash stories. But it seems like he's following a proto-Roswell story, which reads very similar to the Roswell story now.
I haven't read the book, and I'm not going to say anything for or against it. I've actually got it on order, and I guess
you're like me,
reading it in the midst of trying to read all of his diaries and everything. which are amazing. I mean, if you read any UFO books, read volumes 1 through 4 of Forbidden Science. But yeah. Oh, what I was kind of surprised about was people read that book or even just heard about it and didn't read it. And the first thing they said was, okay, he's gone off the deep end. And the second thing they said, which kind of really surprised me, was, well, this completely negates all of his earlier work. And I was thinking, how does it do that?
Uh-huh.
I had a, I had an interview once, and this guy was saying how much Timothy Leary was a horrible drug-addled, doofus. And I said, why do you say that? Because he said he saw him one time and he just seemed out of it. And I said, have you ever had a bad day? Have you ever done like something where you were just exploring something and somebody caught you on a bad day or whatever it was? Mm-hmm. Have you ever? And I don't think that, and people I know that are very much, Vallée fans that have read the book, 2 people I know, encouraging me to read it. They say, look, it's vintage Vallée. He's exploring something for a little while. Because everybody says you have to be in a category. This is the person that does this. This is the person that does this. This is this person's area. He's in all of it. Everybody thinks, the thing is like, oh, he's a psychosocial hypothesis guy. It's like, I guess that's what he's best known for, because he started talking about it really before anybody else in a systematic and intelligent way. But I think he's saying, well, if this stuff does exist, let's follow it to its conclusion and see what we can find here. And he's seen things which he thinks are possibly not normal and not natural origin and possibly not human made, if that's possible. He doesn't know yet. He's exploring that possibility. And then he'll move on to something else. And I kind of think he really doesn't care what people think about what he's doing.
Oh, he shouldn't.
Of course. And that's, I mean, I sound like a total fanboy, but, probably 75, 80% of what the way I think about this, I'm sure came from Vallée. I was reading his books when I was a kid. I was being amazed by them then. And then, when I finally met him, I was just like, how about that?
I bet.
So, I'll always defend him because he really, really, affected a lot of the way I thought. That UFO Tarot thing, I sent him an email. I said, could you please send, because I knew he liked it and he was going to support it. And I said, could you please send us a quote? He sent me a quote that encapsulated the project in one sentence in a way that I could never have done. And it was exactly what I wanted to say.
Wow.
So I know that a lot of my thought came from him, because it's something that's a lot more eloquent than I could have come up with. That was a perfect quote for the cards. It was something like, the inventor of these cards has found a way to look at the subject that science so far has, the scientific method has eluded us. Like, yeah, exactly. We're trying to look at it from something that's besides the analytic left brain, science part, which is great. It works, but our brains have 2 sides, don't they? There's the creative, there's the intuitive, and then there's the analytical and all that. And so we look at UFOs as machines because they look like machines. So of course, what are you going to do? You're going to study them with science, because science has invented machines, wonderful machines. We're using them right now. But when people tell me, well, what about all this, BS? Why do you care about art and UFOs? Why do you care about the creative process? And I said, if you don't think the creative process is worth anything, then don't watch any more movies, don't read any more books, throw away all your records and all your music, because it's very important. And I think if we start looking at the UFO subject as much as we can through that lens, and I can't tell you exactly how to do it, I've got some ideas. I think that, that this will, this could increase our understanding. And I believe this is an idea that came directly from Vallée, just from the way he writes, the kind of person he is and all that. It's just kind of like, let's find a creative scientist. Let's find a scientist that paints and makes music or whatever. Because I think they have a way of laterally thinking about things that, somebody that's kind of dyed in the mold materialist would not. And they allow these things. And I think the UFO thing, the UFO study should allow it too, because it's an oblique thing. So we should study it obliquely in some ways.
Gosh, Greg, there's a reason you're one of my favorite thinkers in the field. No, like there's 5 different questions. I'm not even kidding that I want to travel from there. I'm like, which one will I pick?
I kind of took over and got crazy. And
No, it's absolutely awesome, because I mean, this is the type of thinking which I think is missing from the field. I know that, well, let's go to the art thing for a minute. Certainly one of the first great books was Jung's Flying Saucer book, and he had his patients, working out mandalas and UFOs, and there was a significance in the way they painted them. And I think you also, in one of your books, maybe it's at Defies language, you talk about the contactee movement itself maybe being like some great art project.
Yeah, I said, is it an unrecognized art movement? Because it has all the, it's like an art movement, except it just has space people in it. They've got poetry, they've got music, they've got artwork, they've got diagrams, and they've got a very, they've got a peaceful anti-war kind of message, and at least the ones from the 1950s, 60s, and to me, it all has all the earmarks of an art movement. It just has UFOs and space people in it. It's partially why one of my email address is Space Brother, because I just kind of it's an important and unrecognized and kind of forgotten part of history. Like you said at the beginning there, I mean, there's elements in there that we would do well to pay attention to now and continue to pay attention to. And I think that's discussed in A is for Adamski in various ways. Yeah, a lot of it is making fun of them, being dismissive, but a lot of it was very funny.
Did you spend time with have you ever gone to the Unarius Academy of Science? I know you're Californian based, so.
I'm in San Diego right now.
You go.
Their headquarters is 5 miles from where I'm sitting right now. The first article I ever wrote, paying article, was about the Unarius Society, and I went down there. There's a picture of me, like, how old was I? I was 25 when I wrote that article. And there's a picture of me at 25 standing at the Unarius Society building with one of the people there. They took me on a tour. They were very nice. They showed me around. I did not get to meet Uriel, the founder, but she was very old at that time anyway, and they didn't know who the hell I was. But yeah, they showed me their video editing facility. They gave me a pile of books.
They did the same for me when I was there in '99. They just loaded me up.
Yeah, and they also gave me a pin with a flying saucer shaped pin to wear.
Oh, really? I didn't get that.
It's one of my favorite things ever. It's beautiful. I mean, I wish I had one on the wall that was 10 feet wide.
What did it say? Did you say it said something? The pin? I talked over you. I apologize.
No, it didn't say anything. It just it's just, it's like about that big, and it's shaped like a little, classic flying saucer, and it's just covered with blue and white rhinestones.
Oh, wow.
It's wonderful and cheesy and, and beautiful and everything all at the same time. And on the back, it just says Unarius. It's stamped in the metal.
It's funny. I was there in '99, so Uriel had passed by then. Charles Spiegel was I guess the cult leader or the person who was in charge of the organization. And he passed shortly after. In fact, I'd written for other publications, but my first, I suppose, 40. In fact, I wrote the piece for 40 Times because I was probably the last outsider to spend time with Spiegel. So it's funny that there's a shared background. We both wrote a very early piece about but what made me think about art is when I was there, I remember I dated for a while when I was in college a girl who was a member of an amateur musical society. And when I was at Unarius, it felt like those meetings at the Amateur Musical Society. It just felt like all of these people interested in pageantry, all of them not necessarily particularly talented, but they had real jobs outside of what they like to do on the weekends. And they were like, okay, next Tuesday, we're meeting for the cleanup of and I'm like, this is exactly what it used to be being involved with an Amateur Musical Society.
Yeah, it's a local community of people with a shared interest, and it never shows up on anybody's list as anything dangerous or bad or anything. They're just nice people.
Yeah.
They're peaceful, nice people that basically do everything that every decent religion does, which is, treat each other and treat everybody else nicely. They just happen to get their inspiration from a woman that rode around in a Cadillac that was painted with flying saucers on it.
Yeah.
So what? That's great. I mean, whatever, like there's a Patton Oswalt thing. I don't care what your belief system is. If it makes you a better person, then go for it. So that's kind of how I feel about the contactees. Aetherius is like that too. The group in Los Angeles, they're over there. I actually live probably about 5 miles from the Aetherius Society too, and I used to go there and watch them do the spiritual battery charging, where they like pray to that thing that's on a tripod. And I saw George King there a couple of times too.
I was there, but after King had passed. So wow, you got to see
went
George
there
King
twice while he was still alive.
Wow.
Once he came up and gave a speech. Both times he had all these robes and his big Pope's hat on and everything. The first time he gave a talk, like a Sunday sermon, and I saw that. I was just like in the back with my mouth open. It's like, I'm watching George King talk. And the second time I went to a spiritual battery charging, he came out in his pajamas because he lived right next door, and he yelled at everybody for praying too loud. What did he say? He said, "Don't yell at it like a lot of friggin' idiots." That's what he actually said.
Oh, wow.
I think he was trying to get to sleep and they were praying too loud.
Like the cranky old neighbor. You kids, keep it down out there.
Yeah, that's basically what it was. And he was just in his pajamas, which is really funny. He didn't come out in all of his costume or anything. He was in his pajamas. It was wonderful.
Speaking of art, I have to ask you. Listen, as I said, I backed the Kickstarter for just 2 decks, so Jen and I could both have one of the major.
Thank you.
Oh, of course. I mean, I was so excited.
Had a synchronicity with you when the deck came out.
That's right. Well, when you shared the John Keel card, which was the Hermit, that same day, I lost. It's a long story and I won't go into it, but I didn't bring my UFO library here and it's lost. So I've been rebuilding it. I had a pretty extensive library. So the day I got Keel's, I guess, magnum opus, Operation Trojan Horse, that arrived, like the hardback copy I really wanted, the same day it arrived, you dropped the artwork for the Hermit. And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And then the next time you dropped Stanton Friedman, we were talking about you and Stanton Friedman on the show like the night before.
Also the same day the card came out, or the day before, when Miguel Romero, the artist, when he finished it and showed it to us, it would happen to be the anniversary of the Silver Bridge collapse, which is on the card.
Wow.
He said he did not plan it. He wasn't even thinking of it. And when he did it, he said he got the chills. And he was like, oh, my God. I mean, I didn't even think about this, but this is the anniversary day. Why did I wait till today? I don't know. And then that same day, or the next day, when we made it public, is when you told me what happened. What you just told me. And I went up on Twitter and a couple other places, and I mentioned those 2 things. And I said, the cards are synchronicity generators.
Fantastic.
They're already stirring out of their incubator and ready to go out and start causing wonderful things to happen. It's just I really think that there's something magical about the cards.
I think
in the way of Western occult magic. In fact, I've told the people in the group we're treating it as a magical working. We're not like chanting and doing things like that. It's like we're bringing something into existence. It already exists in the future. We're just helping it come into existence, which is kind of how I think about just about anything I do. Like, I want this to happen. Okay, it's already happened at some point in the future. How do I navigate reality to get to the place where that thing actually exists? And that's what we're doing with the cards.
Huh. I love all the artwork so far. I'll be honest, I think it's awesome that Whitley Strieber is the fool, but I was like, Jim Moseley should have been the fool. Well, I think I even told Kuchin maybe that. Why wasn't Moseley the fool or something, if I recall?
He wasn't the fool because Whitley Strieber picked the fool himself.
Well, that makes sense then. Now, I'm going to ask, and I don't want you, I know you probably can't say what the future cards are, but if I'm right,
the magical working thing.
Oh, okay. Because I have a guess on the devil, and my 3 guesses would be, and you don't have to say yes or no, but I'll watch your eyes and see.
One of them will be right.
My 3 guesses would be either Doty, Moore, or Class.
Yeah.
They're my 3 guesses for the.
Well, Moore can't be on them because he's living, and I don't think he wants to be on them.
Okay.
I mentioned it to him, and he said, I don't know if that sounds like a great idea. I was like, okay. We won't put you on the cards. I still talk to him about once every month or 2, and about once a year, he visits his family, and I see him.
Oh, wow.
I see him later this month.
Wow. So maybe I'm wrong. I don't think it's Doty, because I actually wrote to Joshua Cooch, and I hope Doty is the devil. It would be so funny. I know Doty would think it was funny too, but Coochen didn't tell me one way or the other. But I didn't feel it was. But I thought,
good, because he's not supposed to.
No, he didn't. He wouldn't tell me. And I thought, but I always thought Doty Class or Philip Class or Doty, or I'm just trying to think who the devil. I'm fascinated with who everybody is, by the way. I mean, Keel was great. Keel, it's such a great, and Valet as the magician is so great as well. So
that was the first one about 3 or 4 years ago. I was just sitting in a cafe or something somewhere, and I write my notes on my phone. I just because it's always with me. So I think of something, I immediately put it in the phone. I've got 300. I mean, it's probably not that, probably 1,000 notes right now over the last 10 years. And one of the notes just said UFO Tarot. And then I just started listing the cards and who should be on them. And the first one was the magician. It was Valet. And, the Hierophant, the Emperor was Heineck at that time. And some of the ones I thought of are the actual cards, and some of them we've changed, but I had a group called the Right Brain Project, based on what I was just saying a little while ago. And we were having one of our meetings. We call them salons, and we were kind of stuck about a project to do. And I said, we were kicking ideas around. I said, well, I did have this UFO tarot thing I was thinking of, and everybody said, huh, what? It was like somebody plugged a power source into us, because everybody said, yes, that's what we're doing.
Wow.
So I was kind of like, okay, that must be what we're supposed to be doing. So, and since then, it's just been kind of, all cylinders, full speed ahead. So, and then Miguel, he said, I suppose you expect me to do the artwork. And I said, I don't expect you to do the artwork. I think it'd be nice if you did. If not, we'll find somebody, but why don't you take a crack at it? So he, we all decided, said, Valet's a magician, no way around that. And everybody in the group said, yep, that's right. So Miguel took about a month or two, something like that, and he did one. He just wanted to do a proof of concept to see if he could do it, because he'd never done the style he's working in right now is a style he made up for himself. He didn't derive it from anything. Well, it derives because all artists use other artists' work, but he has never done anything in this style. It is a style he created for the cards and for himself to do the cards. And when he showed us the Valet card, we were all completely flabbergasted and stunned and said, we got to do this. And he said, yeah, we got to do this. So he did 3 or 4 more, and it took 2 years. And he said, if we're going to finish this, I'm going to have to do this full time, because there's no other way I can do this. I just can't do it part time. It'll never get done. So that Kickstarter campaign was basically so he could have money to live on while he worked on these cards.
They're fantastic. I mean, to be honest, and this sounds like I'm BSing, but I'm not. It's my favorite looking tarot deck since the White Raider. It looks just, or the White Raider. It's just such a good looking card. They look just phenomenal.
Yeah, well, they're derived directly from the Rider-Waite Smith.
Rider-Waite, there you go. I got the wrong way around. Yeah, they look fantastic.
It's the one most people know about, and we thought, okay, let's just start from the most popular deck and the most recognizable deck, and then riff off of that. And if you look at them, I mean, they're following the Rider-Waite Smith, I say too, because that's the artist, Pamela Colvin Smith. They're following that deck very closely in a lot of cases. Yeah, we're going to go off schedule a few times because we feel like it, or we think it's funny or whatever. But the Hierophant with Stan Friedman, instead of having him sitting on this throne, he's sitting on a scientist's office chair, kind of like Heineck is, because that's the chair he would sit in. And behind him, instead of these big columns, there's giant nuts with bolts at the top, because he's the Pope of nuts and bolts ufology.
That's fantastic.
And at the top of the bolts, the nuts, you can see the screws going up, but at the top there's bolts attached to it. They're all shiny, and the Roswell symbols are incised.
Oh, I have to go back and look at it. I missed that part of it.
Yeah, and he's holding up the blacked out documents, and because
the MJ
the Hierophant is kind of teaching, because he's the keeper and the spreader of knowledge, and that's kind of how we thought about Stan. And
I only ever saw Stan once, but that's not an.
I met him quite a few times, to the point where he actually remembered my name after a while. And I love Stan. I mean, I didn't agree with him on a lot of stuff. Not that it is my place to agree or disagree with Stan, but he didn't care. And he was nice. I mean, he could have a complete disagreement with you and still treat you as nicely as his friends. And that, that's really rare. And that's, that's kind of why we wanted to honor him on the card too. Some of these people on the cards I have, personal connections to, and, in some way, small way, they're not friends or anything, but, I knew Whitley well enough that one time I said, you're going to be on the cards. Is that okay? And he said, yeah. And I said, which one do you want to be? He said, the Hanged Man. And I said, okay, exoterically, that seems a little victimizing for yourself. He said, yeah, even though we both know what it means, it doesn't mean somebody that's, literally a hanged man. It just means you're in a quandary. And he said, well, how about the Fool? And I said, that's it. You got it. And he was right. It's a perfect card for him because he's on the Rider-Waite deck. He's the Fool is basically just looking into the sky and walking off a cliff, because that's what the Fool does. The Fool persists in his folly. The Fool becomes wise that way. It's a divine fool, not a stupid fool. And not a jester fool. I mean, that's the other reason why we didn't use Mosley for it.
Okay.
It's somebody that is foolish enough to just put everything in jeopardy to find something out, which is exactly what Whitley did.
Huh.
And so he's walking away from his cabin. His cabin's in the background, and it is his cabin. Everything on the cards is very heavily researched. That's his cabin.
Oh, wow.
You look at pictures of it, you'll see it reproduced on the card. It's the actual cabin in upstate New York. And instead of the little white dog there telling the Fool not to run off the cliff, it's both of his cats that lived with him in the cabin, him and Anne in the cabin when all this stuff was going on. Co and Sadie were the name of the cats. And he sent me pictures of them, and they're on the card because of that. And they're doing what cats do. It's like, go ahead and walk off the cliff. We don't care.
I have a cat called Valet, by the way. Just saying.
Oh, that's great.
But it's
there's an alien, the communion alien heads in the sky near him. There's a boomerang UFO up here. Over the cabin, there is an owl flying, and to be able to see the owl, there's a light backlighting the cabin because the whole time he's at the cabin, there was all these lights, bright lights outside. So we have this mysterious light blasting the back of the cabin in silhouette, and then there's the owl, really small. You can see an owl flying over the cabin.
Oh, I got to go back and look at the art because I've been sent it, but I have to look at all that detail because some of that minutia I think I've missed.
Yeah, it's all these little details are in there. There's Easter eggs, and we're not even going to explain everything because if you explain everything, people don't have the freedom to make their own connections and discoveries and all that. The Keel one, he's standing on a piece of paper. People don't really notice it says fides on it, I think, which think means belief in Latin. Because he said belief is the enemy. So he's trotting on this piece of paper that says belief on it.
Fantastic.
So all kinds of little things like this. We just pepper all the cards with these little symbols and things that represent that person's life or something that was important to them or something that they discovered that we want people to know about. The cards is not an encyclopedia. It's a really intricate opinion piece. It's very heavily we make no attempt to be neutral about it. The cards represent a really specific point of view. These people are important, or this case is important. Here is why. Here are some things associated with that person. If you like them or you're interested, it's a nice way. It's like, wow, this card really speaks to me. What about Stan Friedman? Or what about Whitley Strieber? Or, what about Ann Druffel, who's a strength card? I mean, and then you can put them in different, you can do a reading with them, or you can just throw them on the table and see what comes together. Like, what if Ann Druffel lands next to Whitley Strieber? Well, how are they connected? It's sort of a way to get your brain working. And like I said, have a very personal connection to these things by discovering things yourself rather than having them dictated to you out of a book. Images talk to our minds and our subconscious in a lot different way than words do. And I kind of, because of this right brain thing that I'm talking about, the art thing, I wanted to get this group together and mine that idea for something. And the tarot cards were the perfect way to do it.
Have you had cards which you've clashed on, or the group of somebody's won something and there's been an argument about who we should have as as the devil, for example? Has there been clashes, or has it been fairly unanimous?
Nope. No, there hasn't been. People will express opinion. This is why, the people I got together to do these cards, they're very close friends of mine. They're really smart. They're, probably all of them are smarter than me, and they. That's who you should have. Your friends should all be smarter than you.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
And they, we all discuss it because we all know we're eventually going to agree on everything. there's never been a big argument. We just kind of throw a bunch of ideas around, and we kind of narrow it down to something. And when we say, okay, Anne Druffel's going to be strength because she stood up against like skepticism. She was a woman in ufology when there weren't too many then. There still aren't. And she was steadfast in this throughout her life, and her faith was very important to her too. She was a Roman Catholic. So all these things to us meant, were something that represented strength. We kicked around a few other ideas like Carla Turner and all that. But we thought, let's have her be strength. And, everybody, like somebody suggests something, we're all kind of, well, maybe. And then suddenly somebody says something, we're all like, yeah, that sounds right. So we start riffing on it. And if the riffing gets better and better and better, then it comes, because like I said, the thing exists in the future. I think the cards exist and they're just telling us from the future what to do. Wow. We just have to sit there and discuss it. And then Miguel has to do the grunt work of making it look the way it's going to look. He's ultimately he determines the look of it, even though we all decide, what's going to be on the card, where are they going to be, is there going to be a Trojan horse on the keel card? Yes, of course, there's going to be a Trojan horse, So he decides where it's going to go and how it looks good in the composition. And then he adds his own personal touch to it or adds things he thinks should be in there while telling us. I mean, it's truly a group effort. But ultimately, he's the one that has control over the look of the cards because it's a style that he has developed. And, when we put it up on Kickstarter, we're just like, I had angels waiting in the wings just in case we didn't make it. It's like, okay, could you like kick in $1,000 or $2,000 at the end if we can't make it? It made 204%. I could not believe, we were all like, what? We could not believe people were so interested in it. It was like, it was like somebody gave you an unexpected gift, which is truly what it was. So I think it resonated with people, I think it really, it resonated with me. I saw it, I think, on Joshua Kuchin's page, and I was like, wow, I got to get a couple of these, so. Yeah, and there's going to be a book with them that has we're just doing the major arcana now, and when we're done with it, if all of us haven't gone insane by then, we're planning to do the 56 minors, which is going to be a real project. But at that point, I think and we already have basically a methodology. But at that point, we'll have enough of a methodology that we can bang them out, or Miguel can bang them out. And then we can start exploring a whole bunch of other things that we didn't explore in the cards. Like, Doty might appear in the minor arcana somewhere. He's not going to be in the majors, I don't think, because we're kind of concentrating on people that are no longer alive. One, because we want to honor them, but two, there are legal issues. Mm-hmm. When I showed the Emperor card to Paul Hynek, like 2 years ago, I saw him at a convention. I said, hey, by the way, there was something for the speakers. I wasn't a speaker, but I sneaked in. Paul Hynek was there. A friend of us introduced us. And I said, hey, Paul, I'm working on something, an art project with some friends. And I showed him the thing. And he said, that's amazing. I said, do we have permission to use your father's image? He says, I don't know what that is, but yeah, if my dad's a public figure, I can't really say anything. All I ask is that when you're done, can you give me that? I said, yes, we will. Fantastic. So, like I said, it's much easier. And also, as we go further, we'll realize, if we can use people, we've so far got 2 living people on the cards and 1 more coming, and we've gotten their permission. Huh. And they're very nice about it, like almost embarrassingly so. And I don't know if it's the next card we're going to do or not, but it's another female card. Huh. So there are a lot of female figures in the major arcana in the tarot, and we thought this is great because we can highlight female researchers. Obviously strength is a female on the card. Okay, we're gonna have a female. It's gonna be who's gonna be Anne Druffel. Why not? And we didn't ask for permission because one, she's not around anymore, and 2, we're not making fun of her or doing anything controversial. We're honoring her. Mm-hmm. If anybody gets upset, like her daughter, I can't remember her daughter's name. She's very nice. I met her. That our main argument was we're trying to remember these people in a nice way, in a way that tells people what they were about, in a way that, like I said, I keep using the word honor, but that honors their memory and their work that we respect. I think I've got Anne Druffel's "How to Defend Yourself Against Alien Abduction" book back there somewhere on the shelf. Yeah. That comes from her Christian faith. And she said that, I guess if you just, like a lot of Christian ufologists say this, if you just like I don't know what it is, say John 3:16 or something, the aliens will stop. I don't know
Well,
if it works. Maybe it
yeah.
does. Maybe any faith you call on will suddenly rearrange reality in that point and change things or change your mind about what you're seeing. I have no idea.
Have you seen, just on that note, have you seen the documentary Aliens and Demons featuring Michael Heiser? It's essentially just Michael Heiser talking for an hour and a half.
No, I haven't seen it, but I think they actually asked me to be in it. And
okay.
Yeah, good. When I was at Roswell in 2017, I was there for the 60th. And a Christian group actually brought me in to speak. And I said, do I have to say anything faith-based? They said, you say whatever you want. We're signing you up so you can talk about non-alien, non-ETH ideas. And I just happened to be in that group, and they came by and said, would you want to be in this film? I was like, I had no idea what it was about. So all I did was say, maybe. And I quoted them some outrageous amount of money because if I knew they were going to say no, and if they didn't, I guess I'd just make a bunch of money. But I got the gut feeling that I didn't want to be involved. So
it's interesting because he talks about he talks about Nick Redfern, or I don't know if he mentions
Nick's in it.
I mean, maybe this is a different doco because I think it's just Mike Heiser just talks, but he certainly talks about Nick Redfern's Body Snatchers in the Desert, or whatever the title of that book was. Yeah. And that segues quickly to something that I really I'd like to touch on you a little bit. When I was doing my dissertation on the topic, which I finished in like 2006 into 2007, I remember saying towards the end of it, the two most significant books that are being discussed recently is Nick Redfern's and obviously Project Beta. So let's just we're not going to go down the Project Beta path ridiculously, but what I know that you're friends with Will Moore, and I know that you've certainly had a lot to do with Rick Doty. The minutiae of the Benowitz affair isn't of particular interest here. It's been talked about again and again and again. But what does interest me, because I'm somebody who's interested in UFO belief, perhaps more even than I'm interested in the reality of the phenomenon or not, is there seems to have been so much of what today is what I call X-Files belief, or that is normally called dark side hypothesis, perhaps among ufologists who know a little bit more about it, whether it's the Roswell story or whether it's Dulce, which obviously you've talked extensively about, or whether it's aliens having some kind of interaction with the US government and plots. It all seems to me, this important belief system seems to have come out of things talked about by or promulgated by William Moore, Jamie Chandere, Rick Doty. And I often wonder, and you probably know far better than I do, how much of that belief system do you think was really crafted by just this small cadre of people that so many people in the UFO community still subscribe to today?
I think that the source of it was Benowitz himself, probably for 75, 90% of it. And the rest of it was encouraged by these people by either pushing him along the path or not pushing back on him. Because what people forget is he already had some problems to begin with. The interaction with the Air Force and intelligence just made them worse. And that's because they wanted him to get further and further and diverge away from whatever he was looking at, whatever projects he was looking at. One of them, which might have been possibly a way to communicate with satellites with lasers. I don't know if that's true. That's my best guess about people. And I think I make that clear in the book. And this is a best guess depending on who you talk to and who I talked to and what was going on at the base and what was suggested to me. I could have been disinformed. I don't know. And
you talk about it in DEFIES language as well, because you say since then there was discovery about this kind of laser stuff, right? Like that, but perhaps there was some kind of laser thing, which was the lights that Benowitz was seeing.
Yeah, there's astronomy. Well, it says it's astronomy. Basically, they're watching satellites. There's observatories there at Kirtland. I got to drive within about maybe a half mile to a mile of them when one of the people that used to work there took me onto the base and drove me around. And if you see pictures of them, which are in the book, they look like observatories because there's big telescopes in them. They're not there to look at stars. They're there to look at spy satellites coming over. At least that's my understanding. It makes sense to me. They may be doing other things. I don't know. And the thing, I've never seen the telescope in there, but they're built as if they're telescopes with the dome and the thing that turns so they can. And at the time, they were developing, I was told, something called adaptive optics, which had to do with making accounting for and counteracting atmospheric like air currents and all that warm and cool air and things in the atmosphere will distort. That's why stars twinkle. They will distort an image. And what this the telescope that this guy developed, I can't think of his name now because it's been so long. Anyway, it's in the book. He developed a telescope that had a mirror on it, a reflective mirror, like a primary mirror, that had plungers on it. And so the mirror was deformable. So you could actually, and when the thing was working, it looked like there were ripples going over the mirror because those little plungers were pushing and pulling on the mirror and deforming it in just the opposite direction that the atmosphere was bending the light. And the way they figured out how much the atmosphere was bending the light was by shooting a laser up through the atmosphere and seeing which way the laser was being bent by the different air densities and temperatures and all that. And then counteracting that, like, the laser bends over here, at 80,000 feet. So the mirror bends it back the other way so that it, in the opposite direction, almost like noise canceling. It's kind of optical noise canceling. And so what they developed this for so they could see what satellites were coming over and what they were doing and which way they were pointing, and another part of this, which I don't know if it's true, but, various people told me the same thing, is that the satellites that being used by the Soviets were not being communicated with by radio, by electromagnetic radio waves. They were communicating with them with lasers. So they would blast like a laser at the satellite, and the satellite had a sensor in it where they could pick up, they could blast a certain type of light pulses at it and would tell the satellite to turn this way or fire its thrusters and do this. And so when it came over Russia, they'd shoot the laser at it, adjust it to do this. It'd come around the United States side or wherever they wanted to look. It would be doing what it was supposed to be doing. It'd come around again. They'd blast some more lasers at it to do another thing. And in this way, one, the signal would get there, I guess, a lot less garbled, I suppose. And two, and more importantly, it couldn't be intercepted unless you were right in the laser beam. So because they had people in Russia that were working in defense factories and sources of information, that's how they found this out. And so what was going on was they wanted to find out, because Benowitz was finding out things he shouldn't have known. And some of the things had to do with things that where their assets in Russia and other places could have been exposed if somebody knew they were looking at. He was just blindly looking at this stuff, but they didn't know that at the beginning. He looked like he was doing something very dangerous, and they did not know if he was doing it for the Soviets, unwittingly for the Soviets or the Chinese or whatever. So that's why they were interested in what he was doing. Like I said, I mean, it in no way excuses what happened to Benowitz, but this was the motivation. So they discovered, because of their assets in Russia, I was told they discovered what kind of laser and what the code was. And so the laser would come over the United States, and every once in a while they'd shoot a command at it, and a little satellite would go whoop, it would come back over Russia, and they'd go, "What's going on? That shouldn't be doing that." So they'd readjust it. They'd let it go a few more times, and then they would shoot the laser at it and change it. They'd like mess up the focus or have it trending in a different direction or whatever. But these are these like games that were being played back and forth. There were people from Russia and the United States embedded here, finding out our secrets. That's just the way it works. Right. I said that Project Beta ultimately is a spy book with UFO trappings on it.
That's a fantastic book. I mean, people who haven't read that book, if they have any interest in UFOs and UFO belief, they have to read it. But beyond what Benowitz was onto, or what they were trying to distract him from looking at, there's the other belief systems which seem to be, because certainly Doty
Yes,
and
you're
Moore,
asking.
by their own confession, were committed to, were involved in that Benowitz distraction, but Moore was also, prior to that, the popularizer with Charles Berlitz of the Roswell crash. And then after that, along with Jamie Chandere, he was the popularizer of the MJ12 document. So it's interesting to me that it seems like there was something above and beyond. And I don't know if it was a bigger program or they're just different aspects of entirely different things, but it seems that there's this small cadre of people who all of this stuff just burst out of, which changed the way that we thought about. Like, as you know, if you look at the UFO encyclopedias of the 1980s by Ronald Story or Margaret Sachs, none of this stuff's talked about in 1980. Both of those books came out in 80. And then if you flash forward to Jerome Clark's encyclopedia, like a decade later, it's just so important and so central.
In UFOs is a whole entry. Yeah. Yeah. And you did ask me that question and I didn't answer it. I think a lot of these things that came out of the Benowitz thing originally originated with Benowitz, but were encouraged by Doty. Moore pretty much stayed out of the way. He just listened. People say he was lying to Benowitz. The reason he's lying to Benowitz was not telling him he was being watched. And he did give him one document, that Aquarius document, that he said he didn't want to give it to him, and they just kept saying, "You agreed to this. You're playing the game. Give him the document." So he did, and what Moore told me was such a spy. This should be in a movie if ever a movie is made. He said he gave him the document, and he said, "Is there a room in this building where we could go and talk? Other people couldn't hear us." And he said, "Yeah." And they went into a storage closet or something off the main room in his office. And he gave him the document. He said, "Here you go. I was told to give you this. Take it with a grain of salt." And he said he locked it in a safe and never said anything about it. However, it did affect his thinking. It's not like it was a vacuum and he wasn't going to listen, because it basically said that, the government was interested in UFOs. There is a certain place, the Bolling Air Force bases where a lot of reports go. And so a lot of these things became, canon. But the thing was, when he was talking, he took Benowitz in that closet. He took a radio in and turned it up really loud so that anybody was listening. Did you ever see Confessions of a Dangerous Mind?
Yeah.
I love that movie.
It's great. Yeah, it's
Remember
great.
when George Clooney comes over to tell Sam, what's his name? Such a great actor.
Yeah, I know exactly who you mean. What is his name?
Like Chuck Barris. He comes over to tell him that he thinks there's a mole and that he has to watch himself. He goes and turns on Won't Get Fooled Again, and he cranks it all the way up, and it's like, oh my God, that's like straight out of what Moore told me about Benowitz and what happened with them. And that was Moore was trained to be a spy. He got spy training. It was kind of exciting for him. Why wouldn't it be? And he didn't just mess with Benowitz. He actually helped with other investigations. Like some guy had gone AWOL and stolen secrets or money or something from the Air Force, and they heard he was hanging out in bars on Santa Monica Boulevard, like in West Hollywood, the gay area of Los Angeles. And Moore told me he actually went to some of these bars asking for the guy because they asked him to. He also got. Did he show me any of them? No. I wonder if he still has any. He also showed me postcards he was getting from Russia. And the postcards were from Russian ufologists, supposedly. And they said, "I am Sergey, I am Russian ufologist. I want to talk to American ufologist about stuff." So he would get these postcards, and they had microdots on them with information on them. Or they had some kind of code embedded in them in the way that they wrote the card. But he'd get these cards, and then somebody would call him and say, "Go to this post office and send the card to this address." And he'd have to get on his motorcycle, ride to this post office 100 miles away, put the postcard in another envelope addressed to somebody, and send it off. Oh, and the first thing they had him do was read the card on the phone. So, it's not just, Benowitz being messed with by the government and all that. There was so many weird moving parts to this story. And like I said, it's a spy story with UFO trappings pretty much. And it's just, since I'm into UFOs, I became much more interested in espionage and stuff after working on this book, because that's all I did was I talked to, intelligence people, military people, and then also people on the outside of it, like various UFO researchers. Tom Dooley, who nobody knows about, he used to be in the NSA, but then he was in Austin MUFON. And Gabe Valdez, who was the cattle mutilation researcher guy from Dulce.
Mm-hmm.
He's a very good friend of mine. I went to his funeral. His family, I'm still sort of friendly with his family. But I try to get these stories from both sides of the fence just to see, well, he was getting stuff on his computer, and it's like, well, anybody can say that, but, a government, because people tell me, oh, the government people told you that, so you believe them. It's like, no, I actually asked people that came over to his house that had nothing to do with the government, and they told me the same thing. And if they told me the same thing, I would put it in the book. And if I couldn't find any other source except Doty, Moore, something like that, I trusted Moore a lot more because he's a friend of mine and he's never lied to me as far as I can tell. He tells me what he can. And he's very helpful with the book. In fact, he wasn't happy with it when I was done because I think I said more than he wanted to have said. But he said, I'm not going to tell you to censor anything because, Bill Murray said in Life Aquatic when that article,
movie.
I did those things. I said those things. That's basically what Moore told me. It's like I can't refute it. But it was, like I said, if I got it from two different sources, one inside and one outside the government, I would include it in the narrative. If it was just one source and I thought it was important enough, I would put it in and make it clear that it was that one source. Like the only person that told me that that Alan Hynek had given that computer program to Benowitz showed up at his door. The only person that told me that was Bill Moore. And I trust him implicitly. So, there's no reason for me to disbelieve, but I thought it was important enough. That's pretty explosive stuff.
Yeah.
And if it is, I wanted to put it in the book and let people, and I wanted people to get back to me. I tried to call contact
UFOs
studies and say, do you have any correspondence between Hynek and Benowitz or anything from that period? And they said, yeah, well, we'll take a look at it. And they never did. I wrote them like 4 times and they never answered me. So I couldn't get anything out of it from them. I might be able to get something out of Paul Hynek. I don't know. Like I said, everything in there, I tried to vet as well as I could. And also there would have to be an inside and an outside source if I included it in the book as part of this is the story. Now, I'm sure there's a ton of inaccuracies in there, but there's no way for me to find that out unless I was Falcon or somebody up there that knew what was going on. Moore doesn't know the whole story. Jamie Shandery doesn't know the whole story. Benowitz certainly didn't know the whole story. Doty knew a little bit more, but he didn't know the whole story either. That's just the way compartmentalization works.
Gosh, I mean, this show should go for 3 hours. I am going to ask you. I'm going to ask you another question though, because this is something I wanted to look at quickly. And I'm sorry, I'm going a little over an hour, but I can't help myself.
Okay, I saw one of your shows went 86 minutes, so whatever.
Oh, okay. Well, there you. Yeah, we try to be good. We try to get in an hour, but I don't always have you on the show, Greg.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to fail on getting in under an hour.
I have no commitments. My commitment is to have a beer and go to bed or something. So
you can have the beer with us and go to bed immediately afterwards. So when we're looking at that kind of microcosm's the wrong word, but that smaller operation of leaking information and how all those things which came out of the Benowitz affair and out of the MJ12 documents and out of Project Serpo, which we won't go totally down that rabbit hole at the moment, but we look at that as smaller kind of releases. Do you see something behind the broader, I guess, disclosure that kind of wasn't with the Tic Tac videos or the hype about that? Do you think there's something happening there, which there's more than appears if you're just watching a mainstream media interpretation of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think anything you see anything in the news, especially something from the government, you're seeing like what somebody wants you to see, and you're seeing this much of this spectrum, because it's done for a purpose. They didn't just do it because they thought everybody should know about UFOs. They did it for some purpose. I don't know what that purpose is. I've got this idea. One of my ideas about it is that they wanted people, somebody somewhere wanted people to be interested in this in a way that they hadn't before and to remove some of the stigma. So what I've been saying to a few people is that they're trying to crowdsource UFO research amongst people that weren't UFO wackos, like academics and scientists and things like that. Let's remove that stigma so we can get these people working on this thing, on this project, on this issue. And like Stanton Friedman said, let's get serious people with serious credentials and a serious attitude to look at this, rather than a few people that are interested that people make fun of. And I think that's what that was one of the prongs of this multi-pronged idea of releasing this information and getting it out into the press. And it's removed a lot of the stigma. There's a whole project now from a Harvard astronomer, Avi Loeb, to work on this, called the Galileo Project. So, and I know, I've had a lot of these academics that have emerged since then on my show. I've had Stephen Finley and Michael Masters and a few others that I don't think, 10 years ago, they would have come anywhere near this publicly. They might have talked about it privately, but now they're not scared to talk about it publicly because that stigma has been lifted quite a bit. And I think it stayed that way. And that's, if nothing else, it's like the Apollo program. There's like all this like trickle down to us who are interested in UFOs, where, serious people with money and ideas and training and connections and a network of people that they can tap into are looking at the UFO subject and what might be done with it. And I think that's great. I mean, hard scientists are looking at it. Religious studies people like Diana Pasulka and Jeff Kripal and people like that, they're looking at Steve Finley too. I had him on my show, like I said. They're all looking at this. And, there's nothing, only good can come of that. They might not be at the ufology conferences, the UFO conferences and all that, but so what? You know what? If they can find something out, if they can make some discoveries, if they can make some connections, I don't know about solve it. I don't think anybody can, but make some progress, more power to them. So much the better. And if they have, and also the other thing is academia is they abhor secrecy. The whole purpose of academia is to share information and to debate it and to peer review it, et cetera, et cetera. And that's, we haven't had that in UFO study. So yeah, I'm glad that all these different people are looking at it, and that's the good trickle down from that. I think the other part of this, and Elizondo told me this. I talked to him once, and he said, I said, do you think this is coming from us? And he said, no. I said, why not? Why not? Why wouldn't you think it's the Russians or Chinese or whoever? And he said, because if somebody had this technology, we wouldn't be having this conversation. They'd just say, we have this technology. There's nothing you can do about it. Uh-huh. So I think that's the other part of it. They don't know what the UFO thing is, but they do know if they can get a handle, at least on a tiny little bit of the technology, if it is a technology or it can be accessed with technology, then they'll be that further ahead. It's a new race. It's a new arms race, but I think it has to do with anything that can come out of the UFO subject and looking into it. It could be something that's totally unrelated to it, but the UFO thing led to it. So I think they're just trying everything, just like the psychic spying stuff in the 80s and 90s. I mean, 70s, 80s, and 90s. It sounds insane, but let's try it, because if Russia's doing it and they're doing something with it, maybe we should too. And so I think that's what they're thinking about the UFO thing. Let's look into every possible thing we possibly can. And there's probably 1,000 other things that you and I and Jen don't know about that are motivating them as well. Probably even stronger, and probably would really surprise us. But that's my opinion about the Tic Tac thing and all the fallout from it.
Huh. Well, Greg, we're going to have to get you back on the show. I hope you'll come back, because, like I said, I could go for another hour or two with you without any difficulty whatsoever. But what if people want to get a hold of your books or follow what you're up to? What are some URLs, or a URL maybe, that they should be checking out?
We were just talking before the show. RadioMisterioso.com is now down for some reason, because there's like either there was something wrong with it or a sabotage. I have no idea. I think something went wrong in the coding. So RadioMisterioso.com when it comes back, or just go on, I've got a group on Facebook for Radio Misterioso, or you can just go to, Amazon and look for my books under my name. All the books that you mentioned,
Yeah.
Those are all up there.
And I mean, they should read everything. But anybody who hasn't read that book, like I'm not just saying it because you're on the show. I say it all the time. It's arguably, I would say, in the top half a dozen most important UFO books ever written. So
thank you.
No, it's true. People should read Project Beta.
I had a lot of fun writing it. It changed me in many ways, and that's in ways that I like. So I'm still proud of the book. So I'm glad we had a chance to talk about it. I haven't talked about it in a while. So
I didn't want to bombard you with
Project
Project
Beta.
Beta
Asking me
questions.
about it, huh?
I didn't want to bombard you with Project Beta questions, to be honest.
That's okay. We'll bombard me with other questions when I come back, whatever that might be.
Let's get you back, and certainly because I know you'll be looking at doing the minor arcana deck accompaniment to the major arcana of the UFO tarot. So let's get you back at least then, so we can chat about more of the tarot stuff and the million other questions I have.
All
for
the majors will be out, and there'll be a lot to talk about then too. Why we picked those people and what I'll explain as much as I possibly can, and there'll be a book too that people can. Well, they could order on Kickstarter, but that'll have all the cards reproduced like coffee table book size and a little essay on each one.
Oh, nice. Well, my friend, until we talk to you again, thank you so much for coming on to the show, and keep it weird.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Thanks,
I did too.
Thank you for joining us tonight. If you're interested in checking out more episodes, you can find us at talkingweird.com. If you haven't already, please like the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Talking Weird Podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to Talking Weird. We're available on most podcast platforms and YouTube. And if you do enjoy the show, please leave us a review. Dean and I would really appreciate it. Until then, stay safe and keep it weird.